So we will start this series of lectures on pharmacology, and we will follow the competency based syllabus of NMC, and that will be the one that was released in October 2024. The CBME original syllabus was released in 2019. But this was not very practical. Like in pharmacology there were 5 topics, and they were divided like systemic pharmacology, experimental pharmacology, communication, like that. So this was not very practical, because actually the whole thing was systemic pharmacology only. Rest of them they were very small. Now in 2024 the revised syllabus was released, and now we have 10 topics. Like we can see here: general pharmacology, autonomic, peripheral nervous system, autocoids. Topic 3 CNS, topic 4 is cardiovascular, respiratory medicine, topic 5, and these are the competencies. In 2019 syllabus, I remember there were 85 competencies. Now we have 92 competencies. So like general pharmacology, it has 13 competencies. ANS, PNS, autocoids, it has 8 competencies, like that. Topic 6 is GIT, endocrine, chemotherapy, miscellaneous, and applied pharmacology. So this is more practical, and these are competencies. We all know something that can be done, that we by using what? Various domains of our brain. This you are reading this book, activity book of medical pharmacology, that we have written, and the first chapter of this that we have written as introduction, it contains all this. This contains all this information. So competency is basically broader in the sense it contains normally more than one domains of brain. There are 3 domains of our brain. I think I have included, this is the 3rd edition, recent one: cognitive, psychomotor, and affective domain. There are 3 domains in our brain when it comes to learning: cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. So in syllabus terms we always call it KSA: knowledge, psychomotor, and affective. So we remember it KSA or KSC sometimes. Rather than affective, we call it communication. So it's basically affective and communication. So KSA is the term that we use for these 3 domains. So normally competencies, they contain more than one domain. And why it is important? Because normally we divide a competency into further workable domains, and that is objectives. Objective belongs to one domain. If it is knowledge, then it will be only knowledge based objective. It is psychomotor, only psychomotor. So we further divide a competency into objectives, and that becomes easier to remember. It's not only what NMC has said. This is scientific. This is how our brain learns, how our brain remember things. It remember it piecemeals. So competencies we divide into objectives. So we will try to include to get some idea of objectives also in between, but may not be everywhere. So like this is competency 1.1. We'll try to cover 2-3 competencies today because they are smaller ones. And remember, see this PH 1.1, it is pharmacology, so we say PH capital, and 1.1. 1 means first topic, and 0.1 means competency of first topic, that is general pharmacology. This is how the terminology goes. And what it says: describe the principles of pharmacology, pharmacotherapeutics, and define various terms in pharmacology. So it appears a very small competency, but remember, you cannot cover it in one go. Reason: these terms we will keep defining till the very last competency. So what we will try to cover today was something which is really required in the beginning, and otherwise whenever we come with some competency we will define the terms. So we will get some idea today. So suppose this competency is there, I have to convert it into objectives first of all, because naturally I cannot remember this whole thing in one go. So I have to convert it into objectives. So those objectives would be here, at least 3 objectives I can make. One is, at the end of this session, a phase 2 medical student should be able to describe the principles of pharmacology. This is how we write objectives, SMART objectives we call them. So another can be, should be able to describe the principles of pharmacotherapeutics and should be able to define various terms which are used in pharmacology, though it would be a very broad objective. It should be like, should be able to define clinical pharmacology, should be able to define chemotherapy. So objective is basically specific, very smart. When we say smart, it should be very specific, should cover only one domain. If I have to write the definition, then it should be only the definition, nothing related to that. Describe also, it becomes a larger objective. Actually in describe I can make 2-3 objectives. Like here, if somebody asks me to describe the principles of pharmacology, because it is not covered anywhere, so I have to define also. If I am writing somebody, suppose the question comes in the exam, describe the principles of pharmacology. So it's not that I will start the principles, I will have to describe, I have to first of all define what is pharmacology, and then I will describe the principles of pharmacology. So this topic is basically, we don't concentrate on this topic because in the books these topics are covered under the first chapter, that is introduction, and we never read that chapter, unfortunately, because I always observe whenever the students comes for Viva, naturally any examiner will start from somewhere. Okay, why have you come, sir? This is my exam. So what is pharmacology? And you keep quiet. They would ask you, okay, what is drug? And you keep quiet because you have not read this very first chapter, and that creates a very bad impression. And so this is very important. We should be very serious in completing these first 2-3 competencies. Then only we should move forward. So the question comes, what describe the principles of pharmacology? First of all, I have to talk about what is pharmacology. And though I can talk a lot about the history because this is my favorite topic, but in UG classes I won't like to do that, but still you should know from where the term has come. Pharmacology, the term has come from pharmakon. Pharmakon is a Greek word, K-O-N, and then it became English word with C-O-N, pharmakon. This is meaning drug or poison, and logia meaning study of, science we call it, logos, if you remember the Latin word logos. So it became pharmakon and logia, that means the study of drugs. That is what the definition of pharmacology would be. But exactly, if you see, this is, I can give lot of definitions, but what is most plausible, what can be more accurate definition is, this is the science of drugs and their interaction with the living systems. Actually, simplest definition of pharmacology is to study how drugs interact with a biological system. This is the simplest definition. Everything that is covered in this interaction is covered in pharmacology. But here I like this thing, that it is the science of drugs Though there is a difference between how the drugs are manufactured and what we do in pharmacology. We'll come to that when it comes to definition. So simplest definition is how the drugs interact with the biological system, or rather it would be how chemical products, because there are some investigational drugs also, they are also covered under pharmacology. So but remember simply how the drugs interact with the biological system or living system, that is pharmacology. Then the next question immediately comes, what is drug? General public does not use this word drug. What they say is medicine. They don't call it drug, they call medicine. There is a difference between a drug and a medicine. Drug, actually the term drug is older than the present concept of pharmacology. Remember, present concept of pharmacology, if you see systemic modern pharmacology, I would call it, this is not a very old concept. In our museum you will find a photograph that in 1847, 19th century, Bushim, he started the first department of pharmacology, that was the University of Tartu, Estonia. So it's not a very old concept, pharmacology, modern pharmacology. And actually father of pharmacology, that is Oswald Smithberg, that was somewhere in 1867, that was in Germany, Strasbourg University, and he was working on chloroform. So modern concept of pharmacology is not very old. This term drug is older than that. If you see, this term was used in 14th century French word drogue, D-R-O-G-U-E, or this Dutch droge. So what was this? This was, the meaning of this term drogue is dry, and then it became dry herb. But actually the drogues, it meant they used to have barrels, wooden barrels, where they used to store dry herbs, and this barrel was called droge. So this has come, simply you can remember, drogue means a dry herb. This was not modern medicine. This was because in the past only these plant products, roots, leaves, stems, they were used as drugs. They were used to treat people, and that is why this was dry herb. There was a similar word in German also that means powder. So this was basically dry herb, and then it became a powder. But this led to the modern concept of medicines. But remember, drug and the medicine, they are two different things. Medicine, it evolved from the concept of healing. Drug is a dry herb, and this is the definition of drug. You always make this mistake. Be very careful. This is WHO definition, and every word is important. I keep stressing on that in definition you cannot change anything. Today we will concentrate on two things. What is the definition? We have talked about pharmacology. What is the definition of drug? What is the definition of evidence-based medicine? So drug, I have written in separate lines. Any substance or product that is what is important? Substance or product. Never forget. These are key words in the definition. Any substance or product that is used or intended to be used. Another key word. Used or intended to be used to modify or explore. To modify or explore physiological system or pathological states. and the last and most important, for the benefit of the recipient. So never forget any of these. Any substance or product used or intended to be used to modify or explore the physiological condition or pathological state for the benefit of the recipient. So never forget any of these terms. And like I told you, medicine is a different thing. It was a Latin word, medicina or medicinus, that means of a physician, but the root is basically med. Med is a European word, and simply you can remember the meaning of med is to counsel, to advise. There are so many other uses like taking appropriate measures or something, but it was basically used to advise. Similarly came the mederi, to heal or to treat. But another term that was very common in the past, this was medicus. Medicus. Actually they used to call a physician a medicus. If you see old movies, you will find the term they being used, call the medicus. Nowadays so many series are there on OTT. So if you see Roman culture, they will not call a doctor, they will say call the medicus. So medicus means somebody who is helping in healing. It was not exactly using medicines. There was no concept of medicine basically. They were using herbs, or more than that, they were using some other methods to heal, spiritual methods. So this was basically a healer. So medicine, it evolved as the art of healing, and drug is a powder, is a herb. So when these two things they mix together, now you can say using drugs to heal the patient is the complete concept now. And then we come to, after definition, what are the principles of pharmacology? It's very simple. What can be the principle of pharmacology? What the drug does to the body and what the body does to the drug. That is the principles of pharmacology. So one is pharmacokinetics, another is pharmacodynamics. These are two broad principles of pharmacology. Naturally, because what is pharmacology is how the drug interacts with the living system. So what can happen? Something the drug will do and something the biological system will do. So what biological system does to the drug is known as pharmacokinetics, and what the drug will do to the biological system, that will be known as pharmacodynamics. Pharmacokinetics is further divided into ADME, remember, ADME, absorption, distribution, metabolism and excretion. We'll talk about that in detail, maybe 1.6 competency. Absorption means the drug goes to the systemic circulation, distribution it is distributed, metabolism it is metabolized, and then it is excreted. And pharmacodynamics is opposite to that, what drug does to the body. Again, these highly simplified definitions we are talking about. When we say pharmacodynamics, we should always explain it. What drug does to the body, how it attaches to the site of action and produces effects, produces action and then effect ultimately. So that becomes the whole. If somebody asks you what is pharmacodynamics, this is abbreviated definition, what drug does to the body. So what does it do? Everything is covered under pharmacodynamics. Everything, right from the receptor mechanism to ultimately what happens, including toxic effects. Everything will be covered under pharmacodynamics. Principles of pharmacotherapeutics. Again, what is pharmacotherapy? What is pharmacotherapeutics? Simply remember, when the knowledge gained in pharmacology is used for the management of diseases, when it is pharmacotherapeutics. Remember this. The knowledge of pharmacology, when it is used to manage the diseases, then it is known as pharmacotherapeutics. Something similar deals with the clinical use of drugs in prevention and treatment of diseases. Same thing. Basically, all those information that we have gained in pharmacology, when it is applied, then it becomes pharmacotherapeutics. So you will find so many definitions, but what I have told you is a simplified definition. The application of the knowledge of pharmacology for management of diseases is pharmacotherapeutics. And these are the principles of pharmacotherapeutics. Like in pharmacology, I told you two things: what drug does to the body and what body does to the drug. In pharmacotherapeutics, what are the principles? Rational drug therapy, evidence-based medicine, safety, patient-centered approach, and therapeutic drug monitoring. These are the core principles of pharmacotherapeutics. We will not go right now in details of this because the next competency is this only. So before that, we should complete this 1.1 by talking about some definitions. So these are I have just taken some of the definitions. You will find nowadays this is Google era, so you will have so many terms and so many definitions, but these are important terms that you should remember. Clinical pharmacology. We always confuse between pharmacotherapeutics and clinical pharmacology. If you remember, that is why I didn't say this as definition with the clinical use of drugs. So we always get confused between clinical use of drugs and clinical pharmacology. Remember, these are two different things. Pharmacotherapeutics and clinical pharmacology are completely different things. Clinical pharmacology is related to drug development. This is the branch of pharmacology that deals with the scientific study of drugs in human beings. Human beings. Remember, initially the drugs are tested on animals, so that is not clinical pharmacology, that is experimental pharmacology or preclinical studies we call it. Clinical pharmacology is the science, is the branch of pharmacology that deals with the testing of drugs in human beings for various purposes, naturally for efficacy and safety. Both will be there. There are phases of clinical trials, but it's not exactly clinical pharmacology, is not exactly clinical trial. You should remember, this is the branch of pharmacology that deals with the testing of drugs on human beings for their efficacy and safety. So that is clinical pharmacology. Toxicology. Toxicology deals with the toxic effects of commonly available chemicals. It's not only drugs, remember. Insecticides which are used in the households. So this is the toxic effects of chemicals, commonly used chemicals on the biological system. This is an important branch actually. In the past this used to be pharmacology and toxicology. Now this is forensic medicine and toxicology department. Though this deals with the poisons, I will call them, if something has predominantly poisonous activity, then it will be known as poison. So remember, here the end point is harm. In toxicology, what is the end point? That is harm. In pharmacotherapeutics, the end point is benefit. There is a clear-cut difference. Here you start from the harm, some harm is created, then you study. In pharmacotherapeutics, the benefit is the end point. So there are differences. Otherwise, you are doing the same thing. You are trying to find out how this poison works and then how to treat this. Ultimately, what is the purpose of toxicology? The treatment. How to treat this harmful effect. Then it becomes toxicology. Chemotherapy, this is another confusing term. Basically, Whole pharmacology is chemotherapy only. We are using chemicals for the benefit of the recipient. But this chemotherapy was the term given by Paul Ehrlich. Chemotherapy means, he said, use of chemicals, but he used it specifically to treat organisms, infecting organisms. So when you selectively kill the infecting organism, then it is chemotherapy. So we have antibiotics, antimicrobials, and now we also use this word for anti-cancer drugs. This also has a history, but remember that rapidly multiplying cells, they were considered that they do not belong to us. In chemotherapy, what I am doing, I am killing some organism or some cell that does not belong to me. And so in chemotherapy, we take it for granted that cancer cells, they don't belong to my body. They are foreign to me. And so I am killing them. And so we call it chemotherapy, using chemical substances for killing the malignant cells. So this term chemotherapy is used for both of them. Killing the organisms which are infecting our body and killing the malignant cells. So this is used for both of them. Pharmacogenetics, pharmacogenomics. Pharmacogenetics, remember, this is the study of how single gene mutations affect the drug metabolism in our body. This was an older one. Genomics is a newer concept. So pharmacogenetics was to study the single gene mutations, changes in our body which affect the metabolism of drugs, and classical example is slow and fast acetylators. Slow and fast acetylators, the half-life of isoniazid in some of them is very less, 1-2 hours, and in others it is 10-12 hours, because there are slow and fast acetylators. And then came the word pharmacogenomics. So just remember, I told you in pharmacology and pharmacotherapeutics similarly. Pharmacogenetics is the study of those mutations and how they affect the metabolism, and genomics is applying this knowledge for the benefit of the patient. Easier thing to remember. What we do in genomics, how to plan a regime for a patient. Nowadays it has become very common. You will find there are, first of all, they do genetic studies for cancer cells, and then they decide which drug should be used. In this case, this drug would be effective. In this case, this will not be effective. So that is basically applying the knowledge of genes for deciding the regime for the patient. That is pharmacogenomics. Pharmacoepidemiology, another term that has become very common nowadays, because this is basically, epidemiology in community medicine. So pharmacoepidemiology also is similar term where we study the effect of medicines or drugs which have been marketed in the larger population. This may include drug utilization also, but most importantly, how the drug behaves in the larger population. Remember, when the drug is launched, it has been tested only on few individuals. Few means few hundred. Phase 3 also at the most we can have 1,000, 5,000 patients, but it has not been tested in practical conditions. This has been tested in ideal conditions. So how the drug behaves in the population, what are the effects, are there any other effects also, how it is used by the society, by the physicians, by the doctors. So ultimately it settles down, and then how it behaves. This also includes adverse effects also. This may include some other effects also. So this is the study of approved drugs in the society, how they behave. And pharmacovigilance is again to study the adverse effects, harmful effects of medicines after it has been approved. Pharmacovigilance is keeping a vigil on harmful effects of medicines, because as we are proceeding with more and more discoveries, we can have the safest medicines with us, so we cannot tolerate even minor side effect. And how it is possible? By continuously observing the harmful effects of medicine. So pharmacovigilance is keeping a vigil on the drugs. These are some other terms that we always associate with pharmacology but has nothing to do with that, like pharmacy. Pharmacy basically is the science that deals with the manufacturing, compounding and dispensing of medicines. Nowadays this work is done by pharmaceutical companies. In the past there used to be compounders. So what doctor used to do, used to give a formula, the recipe, and the compounder used to mix all of them and then used to dispense it. Now the same thing is done by pharmaceutical companies. So pharmacy is that branch. Pharmacognosy, this is the branch that deals with the sources of medicines. Sources of medicines. Naturally, we need a continuous source. We need newer and newer medicines and we have to keep searching for. So this deals with the sources and purification of drugs. That is pharmacognosy. And biopharmaceutics, pharmaceutical company we call it. But we never understand what is the meaning of pharmaceutics. Basically, the definition, it says to study the effect of various formulations on the patient. Remember, different formulations, drug formulations, that is 1.4 competency. We'll talk 1.5. We'll cover that in next lecture. But various formulations, how they affect the patient, to study that is biopharmaceutics. So similarly, there are so many terms on ending, but they are just to begin with, then we will continue in every competency. The next competency 1.2 is describe evidence-based medicine and rational use of drugs and discuss why these are relevant to therapeutics. Remember, in pharmacotherapeutics, principles of pharmacotherapeutics, the first two I told you, evidence-based medicine and rational use of drugs. This is that competency. So if we convert it into objectives again, should be able to describe evidence-based medicine, should be able to describe rational use of drugs, and then discuss why these are relevant to therapeutics. So how do we discuss? If somebody asks you to discuss how evidence-based medicine and rational use of drugs are relevant to therapeutics, then what would you do if the question comes? And it may be there, though I always discourage to use the word discuss for undergraduate students, because nowadays you have a question for 4 marks, 3 marks, so it should not be discuss. In discussion, this is thesis. But if the question comes, somebody asks you discuss the use of evidence-based medicine and rational therapeutics, rational use of drugs, how it is relevant to therapeutics. So naturally we will start talking about what is evidence-based medicine, what is rational use of drugs, and then we will talk about what are the uses of these, what is irrational use of drugs. When it comes to discussion, then everything has to be covered. Then what is irrational use of drugs, what are the harmful effects of irrational use of drugs, what are the beneficial effects of rational use of drugs, how to prescribe rationally, what would be the components of rational prescription. So all those things would be covered under discuss. It's up to you. How much you want to discuss is up to you. That is the problem with this verb discuss. Remember, objective has a verb, and that verb is very important. Define, describe. But when it said discuss, then I am responsible for what I want to discuss. That is the problem with this verb discuss. So you can do it. It is rather easier for you to handle discuss, but there are certain steps. You have to start from very basic things, like you have to start from defining the terms and then elaborate on that. So here also comes what is evidence-based medicine. Classic definition. David Sackett is considered the father of evidence-based medicine. That is why I have taken this definition. इसमें वो नहीं आ रहा है, turn on. कहाँ है? नहीं आ रहा है, चलो बाद में देखते हैं. Evidence-based medicine is the three terms are there: conscientious, explicit and judicious. Keywords. Conscientious मतलब हिंदी में अगर इसका मैं कन्वर्जन करता हूं तो कर्तव्यनिष्ठ, ईमानदार. Explicit, with explained with clarity, स्पष्ट, explicit. And judicious means बुद्धिमतापूर्ण, विवेकपूर्ण. These three words are given. Use of current best evidence in making decisions about the care of individual patients. That is the definition of evidence-based medicine. Conscientious, explicit and judicious use of current best evidence in making the decisions about the care of individual patient. This is the definition of evidence-based medicine. Now there are three components of this, remember. One is best available evidence, we have talked about, and second pillar would be the judgment of the physician, and third would be patient preference. These are three pillars of evidence-based medicine. One is best available evidence, second would be the knowledge of the physician, the judgment of the physician, and third would be patient preference. So these are three pillars. In best available evidence, this is the list from top to bottom. I have written on top, you will find which is the most acceptable, most powerful evidence. That is systemic reviews and meta-analysis. Then randomized control trials. Basically meta-analysis is what? We take randomized control trials, many of them, and then we study what they concluded. And then cohort studies, then case control studies, then case series or reports, and then expert opinion. So expert opinion is least important in medicine. When we say, no, this is my personal experience, it is of no use. Personal experience is of no use in evidence-based medicine. Least important. Most important is systemic reviews, meta-analysis. So remember this sequence, this is asked, very frequently asked. And then clinical expertise, skills, experience, judgment of the clinician. In evidence, this was the last one, but this matters. This is one of the pillars of evidence-based medicine. And then patient values and preferences, socioeconomic status, beliefs, expectations. Because you have so many choices in front of you for every disease, you have so many choices. So there is patient preference also. I will go for this. So these are three pillars of evidence-based medicine. And these are steps for practicing evidence-based medicine. is basically like any other clinical trial also. PICO, population, intervention, collect the information, and then outcome. Ask, acquire, appraise, apply, assess. 5 ways. Ask means frame a clinical question. I want to have the answer to this question. And how would I get it? Acquire, search for evidence. We have talked about various types of evidence, so search for it, literature review. Appraise, clinically evaluate the validity. Like I told you, most important is, so if something is proven in meta-analysis and something is opposite is a case report, so I have to give more preference to meta-analysis. So depending on the validity, apply, use in patient care, and then assess. Scientific temperament says don't trust anything, doubt everything, even if it is meta-analysis. Even then, when you are using it, you have the right to decide whether this was correct or not. Assess whether it was correct or not. So assess on your own. You are prescribing. Basically, ultimately, evidence-based medicine is for individual patient. So you are applying this whole thing on a patient. Assess it whether this was really what it claimed to be. तो इस चीज का ध्यान रखना है. So 5 A's remember: ask, acquire, appraise, apply, and assess. And like I told you in discussion, it becomes like, what are the advantages of evidence-based medicine? Standard: improves outcome, reduces variability. Naturally, when everybody is following the same process, so we'll reach on the same conclusion. So similar practice will be there everywhere. Promotes scientific decision making, naturally, and minimizes unnecessary interventions. You are doing the best practice. So if somebody asks you what are the advantages of evidence-based medicine, these 4 things you should remember: better outcome, reduces variability, scientific decision making, and unnecessary interventions are avoided. And this is rational use of drugs. Definition: what WHO says: patients receive medications appropriate to their clinical needs, in correct dose, for adequate duration, at lowest cost to them and community. This is the definition of rational use of drugs. Separate lines I have written. Every line is a keyword. Patients receive medications appropriate to their clinical needs, in correct dose, for adequate duration, and at lowest cost. This becomes complete definition of rational use of drugs. And then what are the principles? The same thing. If somebody asks you how to use a drug rationally, then these are the principles. Accurate diagnosis, the same thing that was given in definition also. There should be, then only you can give correct medicine. Na? If the diagnosis is wrong, how can you say that my prescription was correct? Prescription contains diagnosis and inscription. So they should match. So correct, accurate diagnosis, appropriate drug selection. Correct dose, route, duration. Consider patient factors. This patient may need this. This patient is economically not that much, so there may be some option for that cheaper option. So consider patient factors. Avoid polypharmacy. Monitor efficacy and safety, and patient education and adherence. Because remember, in definition, for correct duration, adequate duration, if the patient is not properly educated, will stop the medication, and then it becomes irrational use of drug. So this is the responsibility of the clinician to ensure that the drug is used for adequate duration, and the clinician should do everything to ensure that it is used for adequate duration. Patient education is very important. So all these are principles of rational use of drugs. Go for correct diagnosis, go for correct selection of medicines, go for correct dose, route, duration, and then consider patient factors, avoid polypharmacy, monitor efficacy and safety. Naturally, it has to be safe, and patient education and adherence. These are principles of rational use of drug. If somebody asks you, describe the principles of rational use of drugs, first of all, you have to define rational use of drugs and then talk about these principles. And then remember, discuss. In competency, what was the term? Discuss. That is why if somebody asks you to discuss, then all these things, as I told you in the beginning, these would be your objectives. What is irrational use of drugs? So something, if somebody asks you what is irrational use of drugs, we have talked about rational use of drugs. So what is irrational use of drugs? My answer will be something that is not rational is irrational. So everything that is not covered under rational use of drugs is irrational. If the drug is not correct, irrational use. If the diagnosis is not correct, irrational drug use. If the dose is not correct, if the route is not correct, if it is not good for the patient, patient factors are not considered, if it is not cost effective, if it is not safe, all these would be irrational use of drugs. So what are the causes for irrational? Polypharmacy, we have said we have to avoid polypharmacy. Polypharmacy in itself is irrational use of drugs. Inappropriate antibiotics specifically. Nowadays there is a lot of stress on antibiotics. Inappropriate. Wrong dose duration, we have said in irrational. Self-medication is one of the important, because you keep experimenting with your body. लास्ट टाइम ये हुआ था, मैंने ये वाली ली थी, वो खा के देखा, नहीं इससे आराम नहीं मिला, फिर किसी पड़ोसी ने बता दिया नहीं ये वाली लेके देखो, तो वो लेके देख ली. सो सेल्फ मेडिकेशन इज इम्पोर्टेंट. इन्फ्लुएंस ऑफ फार्मास्यूटिकल्स, अभी मैं देख रहा था जो OTC ड्रग्स हैं, रिवाइटल का ऐड देखो, वो कहता है कि मैं आपको और दूसरी दे देता हूँ मल्टीविटामिन. तो कहता है क्या इसके अंदर विटामिन D है, क्या इसके अंदर B12 है, क्या इसके अंदर एनर्जी है, 30 दिन के लिए और एनर्जी देगा रिवाइटल. सो नेचुरली people are influenced by this whenever, because remember, age is a natural phenomena, aging is a natural phenomena. This is perception of every human being that with age my energy decreases, and I will try everything to increase that energy. And there are so many ads, right from cold drinks to revital. So these are influencing factors. This will lead to polypharmacy. And what are the consequences? Adverse drug reactions, antimicrobial resistance, increased healthcare cost, and therapeutic failure. All these would be the result of irrational use of drug. They can be long list. What I am telling you is you should be able to write in your exam. My target of this series is you should pass the MBBS second phase exam of pharmacology. So I am being very specific. The same thing I can discuss for one full lecture, rational irrational use of drugs. But we are talking about the question comes in your exam, you have to write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can remember these 3, 4 consequences of irrational use of drugs. In Viva also, if somebody asks you what are the consequences of irrational use of drugs, if you answer these 4, 5 things, by that time the examiner comes with the next question. What is the relevance? This was another part of competency. The relevance of evidence-based medicine and rational use of drugs for therapeutics. This was a part of competency. So what is the So these are core foundations of modern therapeutics. Evidence-based medicine and rational use of drugs I have talked about in the definition only of pharmacotherapy. So these are the core things. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you can remember I am giving you 7 points. One is improves treatment outcome. Both EBM, evidence-based medicine, and rational use of drugs, they will improve ultimately. What is the purpose of therapeutics? The purpose is to use the best practice for the patient, best knowledge of pharmacology for the patient, for the benefit of the patient. So scientifically validated and optimally applied, that is rational use. So improves outcome, enhances patient safety, another important factor. ADRs will be decreased, harmful effects would be less. Cost effective, because when you are doing it scientifically, considering the patient factors also, this would be cost effective also. So third thing would be cost effective. Antimicrobial resistance will be, if you are using it rationally, antimicrobial resistance will be less. Individualized patient care, we are stressing again and again, patient factors, they have to come into picture. Ethical and scientific practice, because this is, you are avoiding irrational, you are avoiding profit driven prescribing. So this is ethical also, because this is based on evidence. You do not have any personal reason for prescribing something, so it is more ethical and scientific. And number 7, improves healthcare systems. If all these things improve, ultimately who will benefit? The healthcare system. There would be more guidelines, there would be formularies which will be followed. So all these things would lead to that. pH 1.3 I think we will cover next time, because, or we can cover 10 minutes. This is 1.3. Describe nomenclature of drugs, that is generic, branded and scheduled drugs, explaining the utility of the nomenclature, cost effectiveness and use. So as I told you, you have to frame questions in your mind, they are your objectives. From this competency, what can they ask you? Describe the nomenclature of drugs. Very frequently asked question, in Viva also, in theory also. What are scheduled drugs? Again. And these are elaboration of, when you start this question, start from what is the nomenclature, and then the next question, what is the importance of this? What is the importance of this? So this is the expansion of those. Refers to the system of naming drugs in a standardized and meaningful way. Standardized and meaningful way. Just imagine the drugs that do not have any name. What would happen? क्या करेंगे डॉक्टर्स? कुछ भी नहीं कर सकते, या फिर जो जिसका मन आ रहा है उसने उस ड्रग को वो नाम दे दिया, तो आप प्रैक्टिस कैसे करेंगे? क्या प्रेस्क्राइब करेंगे? तो नोमेनक्लेचर, एक स्टैंडर्डाइज नोमेनक्लेचर इज रिक्वायर्ड इफ यू वांट टू प्रैक्टिस मेडिसिन. लेकिन बात सारी है वो स्टैंडर्डाइज क्या है, वो स्टैंडर्डाइज क्या है, वो स्टैंडर्ड क्या है. This is the utility of nomenclature. We say it ensures clear communication. Naturally, अगर मुझे पता ही नहीं है कि ये क्या नाम है इस चीज़ का, तो मैं क्या कम्युनिकेट करूँगा? क्या फार्मास्यूटिकल वाले को बोलूँगा कि क्या देना है इसको? रेशनल प्रेस्क्राइबिंग, बिकॉज देर इज़ क्लैरिटी. विल टॉक अबाउट क्या क्या नाम होते हैं, कैसे कैसे होते हैं. तो देर आर ग्रुप्स ऑफ मेडिसिन्स. उस ग्रुप्स में से इफ़ यू आर यूजिंग वन ड्रग देन अनदर इज़ नॉट यूज्ड. सो दिस इम्प्रूव्स रेशनल प्रेस्क्राइबिंग, पेशेंट सेफ्टी. वरना अगर उसमें क्लैरिटी नहीं होगी, एक ही तरह की आप बहुत सारी मेडिसिन देते रहेंगे, तो उसके इफेक्ट तो विल एक्यूमुलेट. There would be, so patient safety and cost effective therapy. We'll talk about how it becomes cost effective. Remember, chemical name, known proprietary name, and brand name. There is one more, we call it code. We'll talk about that also, because I have so many drugs which were coded but they never came into the market. Chemical name is, it describes the chemical structure. We have read in chemistry, there is this International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry, IUPAC. Remember this, in chemistry in 12th, 11th, 12th we have read, that is how we used to identify that this structure should be named like this. It has rules. So it is not in my hand. If this is the chemical formula, then this will be the chemical name. Standardized है वो. So that is chemical. The problem is very difficult to remember. You cannot actually name it. And then generic name, नॉन प्रोप्राइटरी नेम. जितना हम फार्माकोलॉजी में पढ़ते हैं ये सारा नॉन प्रोप्राइटरी, जेनरिक. रिमेंबर, डोंट गेट कंफ्यूज्ड. नॉन प्रोप्राइटरी नेम, जितनी फार्माकोलॉजी की किताबों में आपको नाम मिलेंगे, एड्रिनेलिन, नोर एड्रिनेलिन, वॉट एवर नेम्स यू रीड, प्रोप्रेनोलोल, दे आर नॉन प्रोप्राइटरी. वो कहाँ से होते हैं? जब एक फार्मास्यूटिकल एक फॉर्मूला बना लेती है, केमिकल नेम इज, दे डोंट डिसाइड इट, बेसिकली दैट डिपेंड्स ऑन द स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ दैट chemical entity, and then they apply what should be the name of this. So there is a standard way, there are official names actually. तो आजकल WHO ही सारा देखती है, इंटरनेशनल नॉन प्रोप्राइटरी नेम, INN. In the past it used to be, now also USAN, US adopted names, British adopted names. So those agencies used to give name to this chemical that is going to be marketed as a drug, and this will be universal name. अब उसमें भी प्रॉब्लम हो रही थी, जैसे आप देखेंगे कि यूसैंड एंड बैन, दे गेव सेपरेट नेम्स टू डिफरेंट ड्रग्स. एड्रिनेलिन आई वाज टॉकिंग अबाउट, तो बैन ने उसको नाम दिया एड्रिनेलिन, यूसैन ने नाम दिया इपिनेफ्रिन, नोर एड्रिनेलिन, नोर इपिनेफ्रिन. जाइलोकेन वाज अगेन लिग्नोकेन, लिडोकेन, लिग्नोकेन. तो वहाँ पर भी तो आजकल यू विल फाइंड INN इज गिविंग द नेम्स. तो आजकल आपको इस तरह का नहीं मिलेगा. जो पुराने टाइम का है, आपको मोस्ट ऑफ द ड्रग्स हैड टू नेम्स, नॉन प्रोप्राइटरी ऑल्सो. सो दे आर यूनिवर्सल नेम्स accepted throughout the world. And then these are the key features of these non-proprietary. They are non-commercial, universal, indicates drug classes. Remember this. This is how they are. They decide what should be the name. बीटा ब्लॉकर आप देखेंगे सबके बाद में OL लगा होता है, प्रोप्रेनोलोल, अटेनोलोल, एस्मोलोल, दिस लोल, दैट लोल. सो वी गेट एन आइडिया कि ये बीटा ब्लॉकर ही होगा. ऐसे प्रिल, रेमीप्रिल, एनालाप्रिल. सो वी गेट इमीडिएटली एन आइडिया कि ये एंजियोटेंसिन कन्वर्टिंग एंजाइम इनहिबिटर है. लोसार्टन, टेलमीसार्टन, दिस सार्टन, दैट सार्टन, मीन्स ये ब्लॉकर है. सो दे कीप दिस इन माइंड that the drug should be identifiable. That is why we use so many terms there. It decreases irrational use of drugs because you get an idea that this drug has already been prescribed. तो मुझे इस ग्रुप की और ड्रग प्रेस्क्राइब नहीं करनी है. तो वो जो क्लासीफाई करते हैं ड्रग्स को नॉन प्रोप्राइटरी नेम में, उसमें यू कैन आइडेंटिफाई. Promote rational prescribing, as I told you, reduces confusion, ensures cost effectiveness because they are cheaper. We'll come to that. Why generics are cost effective? क्योंकि अगर मैं जेनरिक नेम से कर रहा हूं तो कोई फार्मास्यूटिकल कंपनी का प्रमोशन नहीं हो रहा है, तो जितना फार्मास्यूटिकल का एडवर्टाइजमेंट है उसका पैसा बचता है, एंड दैट इज ह्यूज. इन फार्मास्यूटिकल कंपनीज एडवर्टाइजमेंट इज ह्यूज. गवर्नमेंट रेगुलेशन ऑफ प्राइसेस, सेम थेरेप्यूटिक एफिकेसी. गवर्नमेंट रेगुलेट्स, आजकल आप देखेंगे जन औषधि, दे आर प्रोमोटिंग जेनेरिक. सो इसके ऊपर बहुत तरह की डिस्कशंस होते रहते हैं, बट फॉर यू रिमेंबर नॉन प्रोप्राइटरी, it is cheaper because it does not need any advertisement. The name has been given by an international agency. If you prescribe it by that name, so cost would be reduced. Why it is preferred? One of the important reasons is government wants you to prescribe by generic name. एक तो important reason वही है. दूसरे ये हैं कि रिड्यूसेस ट्रीटमेंट कॉस्ट बिकॉज दे आर बहुत सस्ती होती हैं, पर्टिकुलरली व्हेन द ड्रग हैज़ कम आउट ऑफ जो उसका पीरियड रहता है 20 ईयर्स का, उसके बाद में इट इज़ अवेलेबल एज अवेलेबल फॉर मास प्रोडक्शन. एनी बडी कैन हैव द दिस थिंग पाउडर एंड मेक वट एवर प्रिपरेशन इट इज़, एंड सो मैनी मैन्युफैक्चरर्स विल कम इन टू द मार्केट. जब वो पेटेंट से बाहर आ गई है तो बहुत सारे मैन्युफैक्चरर्स कैन प्रोड्यूस इट, तो उससे भी उसका रेट बहुत कम हो जाता है. एनहांसेज एक्सेसिबिलिटी, अवेलेबल एनीवेयर. इट इज़ नॉट दैट ओनली दिस फार्मास्यूटिकल विल मेक इट अवेलेबल इन दिस एरिया. इवन गवर्नमेंट कैन आस्क एनीबडी टू मैन्युफैक्चर एंड सेल इट. minimizes prescribing errors. You are prescribing by, because remember there can be very confusing brand names. और उसमें आई रिमेंबर क्लासिकली जो अपने पीजी टाइम से मैं याद रखता हूँ, सिप्लार, सिप्रोलार. मुझे वो इसलिए याद रहता है कि मेरे दूसरे कलीग के साथ में बहस हो गई. वो कह रहा था नहीं यार ये सिप्लार तो प्रोप्रेनोलोल होती है. मैं कह रहा था नहीं यार वो तो सिप्रोफ्लॉक्सासिन है. सो देन वी फाउंड आउट कि दिस वॉज सिप्लार एंड दिस इज सिप्रोलार. सो सिमिलर नेम्स, सो दैट क्रिएट्स कन्फ्यूजन. And then third is brand name or proprietary or trade name. These names are given by pharmaceutical industry. Remember, brand name means it is a product of this pharmaceutical, Cipla, Lupin, whatever it is. So they will give this name because they have to promote it with that name. So they will name it some catchy name, something that can be remembered very easily, because their purpose is different. The purpose is the clinician should remember it. This is how they decide the name. It is marketing driven, varies by company and country. Easy recall for clinicians, that is their primary important concept. Associated with quality perception. Remember, brand के साथ में जब हम जोड़ देते हैं नहीं इसका प्रोडक्ट अच्छा होता है, that is the purpose of brand. This is a branded product. So the concept is this would be better. That is the concept, because the popularity of that brand is behind this name. Can cause confusion and irrational prescribing. I told you similar names can be of different medicines, often more expensive. Naturally they are advertising it, they are pushing it in the market, so this would cost more. When brand names may be used, ऐसा नहीं है कि brand name use करने ही नहीं चाहिए. Narrow therapeutic index drugs, because remember in narrow therapeutic drugs index you don't know when you are giving it to this patient how much would be the plasma level generated. If it is a branded product, they have maintained the quality control. So in every case variability would be very less. So narrow therapeutic index drugs, when bioavailability differences they matter. And पेशेंट फैमिलियरिटी एंड कॉम्प्लायंस. रिमेंबर पेशेंट फैक्टर. बहुत सारे पेशेंट आपको ऐसे मिलेंगे जिनको ब्रांडेड ही चाहिए, और अगर आप उनको वो नहीं देंगे तो वो उसको कॉम्प्लायंस वुड बी वेरी लेस. सो इट्स नॉट ओनली, सो पेशेंट फैक्टर इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. मैनी पेशेंट्स दे बिलीव इफ़ द मेडिकेशन इज़ कॉस्टलियर इट इज़ बेटर. तो अगर ऐसा है तो उसको ब्रांड नेम देना कोई गलत नहीं है. एंड दीज आर शेड्यूल्ड ड्रग्स. शेड्यूल्ड भी एक क्लासिफिकेशन ही है. In different countries, like in US, they call it schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They divide all the drugs in schedule based on their addiction liability. Schedule 1 is those drugs, class 1 are those drugs which are highly addictive, depending like that. In India, we have Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940 and rules were framed in 45. So we also have ABCD schedules, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, except Z. All these schedules are there. Schedule H pertains to us. Schedule H is a prescription only drug. Remember, there are some drugs which are over the counter, OTC we call them. You can go and purchase from the pharmaceutical person. But Schedule H means you have to have a prescription for this. So in Drugs and Cosmetics Act, Schedule H is drug that is can be dispensed only on prescription. Then there are further subdivisions. So Schedule H1, strict regulation, for example, antibiotics, anti-TB drugs. So government can make rules for that. Schedule X, narcotics and psychotropic substances, morphine and others. So these are schedules. When we say scheduled drug, means it is covered under some schedule of the related act. So it is also a type of classification. Like Schedule X drugs you cannot prescribe. You can prescribe only Schedule H drugs only. H1 also you need special training for that, or government can come up with such rules that you need to have this much training, then only you can prescribe Schedule X drugs, palliative care, pain management, and then you can prescribe Schedule X drugs also. Again the same thing, it prevents me. Suppose the drug is what happened to psychotropic substances, कितना बेंजोडाइजेपिन्स का मिसयूज हुआ है, तो उसके बाद में गवर्नमेंट ने क्या किया, उसको शेड्यूल एक्स में डाल दिया. तो उससे क्या हुआ, उसका मिसयूज कम हो गया. ओनली ट्रेन्ड clinicians, psychiatrists could prescribe, or trained doctors could prescribe those drugs. So that is the advantage. This prevents misuse and abuse, ensures safe dispensing, again controls antibiotic resistance, like now under H1, and gradually you will find more and more rigid regulations for antimicrobials. So they would be classified under some other category, and protects public health. Ultimately that is the purpose. I have taken some examples where I want to show you chemical name, code name, non-proprietary and brand names. See, chemical name is N4-hydroxyphenyl acetamide. Can you remember it? The code name that was used for it was APAP. Non-proprietary name is paracetamol. And these are brand names. Tylenol, Calpol. These are various, that is chemical formula, and these are various brands. Similarly, 2-acetoxybenzoic acid, code name was historically ASA, this was known as. Non-proprietary name was aspirin, and proprietary बायर ने एस्पिरिन के नाम से ही बनाया था, लेकिन और भी अवेलेबल हैं. See this complicated chemical name, RS242-methyl propyl phenyl propionic acid, code name was Brufen during development, and non-proprietary name was ibuprofen, and proprietary name Brufen, Advil, Nurofen. All these are brand names. 5-methoxy, 2,4-methoxy, 3,5-dimethylpropiodine. See the chemical name, not easy to remember, actually impossible to remember. Code name was H168/68, and non-proprietary name was omeprazole, and brand names, so many of them, Omez, Prilosec. Again, this was the name for metformin. Proprietary name are so many, Glycophage, Glyciphase, Glycomet. These are brand names for metformin. And this I never forget. पुरानी सातोस्कर में भी ये मुझे मिलता था, और ये कभी ड्रग नहीं बना. This was the code name. MCN343 is a code name for a selective muscarinic receptor agonist. M1 receptor selective agonist, this drug. तो अभी भी क्योंकि M1 selective receptors बहुत कम drugs थी, तो I still remember MCN343. There are few more drugs you will find in the books, but they are not available in the market. They were never marketed. So code name is basically during the development phase. It may not be necessary that this will become a brand name. That is the only reason I wanted to include it. Thank you very much.